Let's sketch the polar curve r is equal to 1 plus sine theta. To do this, we're going to break it into two steps. The first step, we're going to graph with Cartesian, and then we're going to use that Cartesian graph to convert it to a polar graph. So let's look at our Cartesian graph of just the function sine of x. Y is equal to sine of x. Our amplitude goes from 0 to 1, and we start at 0. Let's draw these first. We got pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. We start at 0, and at pi over 2 we go to 1. At pi we go down to 0. 3 pi over 2 is going to go down to -1, and at 2 pi we're back to 0. So that's a rough graph of the function y is equal to sine x. But if we look at our polar function 1 plus sine theta, in Cartesian, that'll just become 1 plus sine x. So we have our graph of sine x, but it's shifted up 1 unit. So let's draw that. It'll go 1 to 2 instead of 1. And it's going to start at 1 instead of 0. So let's draw our intervals of pi. So pi over 2 again, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. Since we're starting at 1, that'll be our midline, just like how our x-axis is our midline right here. So now let's draw our function y is equal to sine x. So we start at 0, then from pi over 2 we go to 2, back down to 1 at pi. Instead of crossing the x-axis to go down to -1 or -2, we just stop at the x-axis. And we just go back to 1 for 2 pi. So here we have 4 distinct sections of our graph. We'll label this 1 right here, 2, 3, and 4. So for our first section, we have a positive number because we're above the x-axis, but our slope is increasing, so increasing. For our second section, still positive because we're still above the x-axis, but this time our slope is decreasing. For our third section, we're still positive, and we are still decreasing. And for our fourth, we're positive still, and we're increasing. And let's just note, for our first section, we're going from 0 to pi over 2. For our second section, we're going from pi over 2 to pi. For our third, it's from pi to 3 pi over 2. And then our fourth one is just 3 pi over 2 to 2 pi. And then for our y values for all of our sections, we go from 1 to 2. For our second, we go 2 to 1. And then for our third section, we go from 1 to 0. And then back from 0 to 1 in our full complete cycle. Now that we have our information that we need to graph our polar curve, let's start off by making our polar plane. So starting from the very right, we go from 0 to pi over 2 to pi, 3 pi over 2, and the 0 is also considered 2 pi. And that is one complete circle. So for our first section, we have a positive increasing, and we go from 0 to pi over 2, and we go from 1 to 2. So we're going to start off at 1. We're going to make our curve to 2, and that's our first section. So let's label that 1. And we're also moving in this direction. Now, for our second section, we're positive decreasing. We go from pi over 2 to pi, and we go from 2 to 1. So for our second section, we start at 2 at pi over 2. We go to pi, but only to the value of 1. And this is our second section, and we're moving this way. Now for our third section, we go from pi to 3 pi over 2, from 1 to 0. So we draw our curve going from there to 0. This is our third section, and indicate our arrow to see which way we're traveling. And then lastly, for our fourth section, we're going from positive increasing from 3 pi over 2 to 2 pi, 0 to 1. So starting at 0 at the 3 pi over 2, go from 0 and draw our curve back to 1. And this is how you graph curves in polar coordinates.